City Council meeting to order, 6 p.m. here, Tuesday, October 28th. I'm going to ask everybody to rise for invocation, Pledge of Allegiance. Let us bow our heads. Oh, Heavenly Father, please care for the men and women who serve this city and receive such little recognition, but are always there when the need calls. Please continue to watch over the citizens of this island, as each is a very special person in their own way. As we show tonight our support for those who have faced breast cancer, dear Lord, please know that we love and care for them and seek your hand in guiding us to a lasting cure. For it is in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Marie, please call the roll.
Councilmember Vitelli.
Here.
Councilmember Burkworth.
Here.
Councilmember Buchanan.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Ferenz.
Here.
Councilmember Carrington.
Here.
Councilmember Loftus.
Yo.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Mayor Cronin.
Present.
Administrator Tucker.
Here.
Attorney Howard. Here.
Very good. All present. Excellent. Next item is a reading of journals of previous meetings. You have the regular meeting of September 30th in your package. I have a motion to approve or amend.
So moved.
To approve.
To approve.
And seconded. Any additions, deletions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Citizens' comments. We have a number of items we want to get through in citizens' comments. First of all, we have the Johnson & Johnson event. Is looking for city-sponsored position. So, you going to walk us through this, or I'm going to ask Kendra to?
Well, Kendra is here, and as is Mr. Payne, correct? And so if you all have any questions, this is the event that Johnson & Johnson's has held in Wild Dunes over the last several years. It's always quite a spectacular event, and it promises to be this year too for those attending that conference. And a portion of what they plan to do this year will actually be on the beach in front of the Grand Pavilion. And because it's on the beach, it requires having the city-sponsored event status. It also required permission from OCRM, which they have received under a special permit status. And it will not be down at the waterline of the beach, so it will not inhibit access to the beach, but basically will be kind of in the dry sand area immediately adjacent to the Grand Pavilion boardwalk.
Okay. This has been reviewed by the Public Safety Committee.
Yes, it has, and we unanimously approved it.
Okay, very good. Any questions on this? All in favor of considering the Johnson & Johnson event a city-sponsored event, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for coming. You can stay. We're going to have an audit report.
That's exciting.
Good luck. We'll work on the weather for you. So. All right, item 2, consideration of polar plunge on February 28th, benefit Special Olympics. Do we have somebody who wants to address this?
Well, we do have the representative of the Windjammer here, and I think that's the only one. But oh, there you are! I didn't see you. You were I was blinded by the other two police personnel sitting there. But this is.
And you think you're going to get off the island?
There it goes.
Standing behind the long arm of the law.
This will operate similarly, but probably a little bit more controlled, a little bit lower key than the polar bear plunge that everyone's familiar with over on Sullivan's Island. It is proposed to be at a different time of year and very specifically to benefit the Special Olympics, and it's going to be billed as a family event for the polar bear plunge. So again, because it is on the beach, it requires that the city concur and name it a city-sponsored event for it to be held on the beach. They have promised to live within all of the city's rules and provide the appropriate insurance.
Excellent.
And I would like to say that the Public Safety Committee also gave unanimous approval to this event.
Well, it's obviously a worthwhile cause, and if I wasn't so frigid in the winter, I'd probably do it. I don't think I'm going to take a plunge, but maybe Jimmy would. No, all right, we'll move on. Any questions for consideration here?
I'll make a motion that we approve the Polar Bear Plunge to Howard
Second.
Wind Jammer.
All right, motion and seconded. Any discussion?
I think we need to make Bobby Ross come up here and talk, just to, since he came this far.
No, I was looking around, I was one person, I didn't see Stan either. He's got all the information.
Well, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Looking forward to a great time, end of February, so good luck.
If I
Thank you.
can, I'll hand these out, these are updated with the specific dates.
Thank you.
Oh, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
get them out.
And now for the peak of our citizens' comments. We're going to have a presentation from our auditors, Green, Finney, and Horton, are represented here by David Phillips and Genia Cornegay. So I guess David's going to come up, or who's going to do the presentation?
I know everybody's excited. This is your Christmas present in October. But as you know, we finished the audit pretty much at the end of September, a little bit into October. And we're trying to bring this as fresh to you as we can. So hopefully you have before you a PowerPoint, but we'll also have one on the screen. And we're going to just try to look at some of the highlights of the 2014 year. I know you're already in 15, so you've kind of shifted your focus, but let's give a quick recap of what took place this past year. I did want to say I really want to thank the management, Linda and Debbie and the staff, because we couldn't get this thing done this quick or as well as it's gotten put together without their help. They do a great job. And I work with lots of municipalities throughout the state, and you were really blessed with the level of staff you have at the size of the state you are.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Uh-oh.
Did you write that?
Yes. All right, let's look at here. You know, the best opinion got a name change a couple years ago. It used to be the unqualified opinion. Now it's the unmodified. So you have the best opinion you can get. Remember this year that at the end of the year, you ended up with about a $151,000 increase in your general fund, but that is after you transferred around $340,000 that you approved in September to go to the Capital Projects Fund. So just keep that in mind as we go through the slides here. Oops, wrong way. All right. We always like to remind everybody about what is our responsibility versus what is your responsibility. Again, your responsibility is to have good internal controls. It's your responsibility for the financial statements, and our responsibility is to issue you an opinion. We don't give you absolute assurance because we don't look at every single transaction, but we give you reasonable assurance. We look at the significant items, so we calculate a materiality, and so we look at the various items on the balance sheet and the income statement if they're significant, or if there's a population of a whole bunch of insignificant transactions. A lot of times we'll take samples or look at persuasive analyticals to make sure that it makes sense, the relationship there. Again, you got the best opinion you can get, and we're in your opinion this year, if you looked in your report, there'd be a separate paragraph in there talking about some changes that are about to take place regarding pension accounting. And we've talked about that with you in the past, and we're going to talk about it in a few more slides. But I just want to let you know that our opinion has a little bit different change this year with an extra paragraph. All right, well, let's look at the general fund here. The fund balance, again, increased $151,000. You have restricted fund balance of about $270,000 for debt service and beautification. You have committed fund balance of about $2.1 million for disaster recovery, and then about $496,000 that you've assigned for beach maintenance. So if you take all these constraints, these are the things that are kind of, you can only spend it for these reasons. The amount of money that remains after that is your unassigned fund balance. That means there's no constraints to it. You as council can make determinations on how you want to spend that because it's not assigned or restricted for any purpose. So you have here approximately $2.5 million, which is about 28% of your 2004 actual in your next year's budgeted expenditures. The GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, is kind of like the Bible of governments. It recommends a minimum of 2 months. And so you can see you're in good stead as it relates to that. If you look at the bottom there on the slide, it's not your bottom, I got to go to the next slide. Again, the reasons to have a strong fund balance is, remember, some of your revenue types are very cyclical. They come in at certain times of the year. Property taxes, the bills go out usually 1st of October. You start collecting them in December, January, February. You don't really collect a lot after that of real property taxes. Business licenses, there's a certain period you collect them, and then you have that money and it has to hold you until the next cycle. So it helps you with cash flow needs. Remember, you have some unique requirements for beach, coastal municipality. You have peaks where you have a lot more going on than other times. It helps you for significant emergencies and unanticipated expenditures. It gives you flexibility. Gives you better rates when you have to issue debt. If you notice, and we'll talk about this in another slide, you refunded some debt and you were able to get a lot lower rate, and you'll get better rates if they see you have a good track record, that you're able to always be generating positive cash flow, and that you're managing your affairs well. And again, it helps you for potential shortfalls at the state. You always hear about the local aid to state. That formula is always being some percentage of what you're supposed to be getting. They're even talking about eliminating it altogether. So you want to make sure you have some cushion to help you, because you never know exactly what could take place. All right, next slide. Let's look at our general fund revenues. We're just going to highlight some of the big buckets of revenues. You had $8.7 million in the general fund this past year, of which 4.3, about half, is property taxes. 2.6 million in licenses and permits, 629,000 in local option sales tax, 445 in parking revenues, 328 in intergovernmental revenues, and about 409,000 in all the other revenues. Now, if you look at the, keep wanting to say look at the bottom slide. General fund revenues increased over the prior year about $287,000, or 3%. Primarily, we're seeing a lot of growth in the business license. Businesses are doing better. They're having to pay, higher business license fees, and permit revenues are coming in stronger as well. Also, you had about a $154,000 increase, $84,000 increase in your local option sales tax, and your property tax revenues came in a little bit more at $22,000. As it relates to your budget, your revenues this year came in about $407,000 over your budget, which is about 5%. Again, most of this is in the license and permit areas and in your local options. So you notice it's in your growth revenues, where if the economy is doing well, those businesses, those fees go up. All right, let's look at your expenditures. Your expenditures were $8.95 million. Of course, the biggest chunk of that is in public safety, fire and police, of about $5 million. $1.1 million in public works, $931,000 in general government, $850,000 in recreation, $731,000 in debt service, and then about $360,000 in other expenditures. Now let's compare that again to the prior year and to your budget. You had a $716,000 increase over the prior year. And that would be alarming if you didn't know anything else. But if you look at why it did increase, we're going to look at the explanations in the little bullet points in the middle, is remember that you did a wage increase that took place January 1st. Remember also you added some additional firefighters and 10% compensation adjustment for the firefighters as well. So that drove about half of that increase. The other half is, remember, we have the first year costs for the consolidated dispatch with Charleston. So this is the first year, so that kind of kicked in there too. Those are the two drivers that drove up your expenditures over the prior year. As it relates to your budget, though, you actually came in $15,000 less than you thought. And that's even after giving the merit increases, because you didn't even change your budget for that. Because you were doing so well actual to budget year to date, you decided we didn't even need to amend our budget. We had enough cushion in it that we could give those merit increases without amending the budget. So again, hopefully that gives you a quick synopsis on your expenditures there. All right, well, let's look at the enterprise fund, which is your marina. It had an increase in net position of $283,000 compared to an increase of about $181,000 in the prior year. The marina fund operating revenues increased about $15,000 or 4%. And again, this is just mainly due to lease income increase there. Your operating expenses increased about $53,000 or 22% to about $293,000. And again, this was due to the fact that you refunded that debt. And what's kind of changed, there's been some new accounting changes that say now bond issuance costs, instead of capitalizing them and amortizing them over the life of the loan, you expense them immediately as incurred. This is a big change that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is doing different than corporate America. Corporate America out there, they'll capitalize them and depreciate and amortize them over the life of the bonds. On down there, transfers, just a quick highlight on that. Transfers from other funds increased approximately $64,000 compared to the prior year due to transfers from the state A-Tax fund for improvements to the water sports dock. All right, Capital Projects Fund. It had a decrease in fund balance of about $66,000 compared to a decrease of $495,000 in the prior year. Revenues, you really don't have a lot of revenues there. It's pretty much interest income or any donations that are given. So it was only $6,000 this year. But remember, last year you got some Greenbelt money, and that Greenbelt money helped you buy, the Mayor Carmen R. Bunch Park, and so that was kind of a one-time event there last year. Your expenditures decreased approximately $1 million to $412. Again, the reason last year we had some of the purchase of the park, and then a $348,000 in expenditures related to the Clark and Ball Field. Whereas this year we didn't have as much. We had purchase of the generator for the City Hall for $65,000, the fencing at Clark and Ball Field for $36,000, 3 vehicles, and a third of cost of the Public Works garbage truck for $63,000. On the bottom there, the Capital Projects Fund received transfers from the general fund of $340,000. Remember, that's what you approved again in September that got transferred in. All right, next slide. We're going to just briefly look at some of your other major funds. The municipal and state fund balance is about $2.8 million. Accommodation tax revenue were again higher than the prior year by about $291,000. What we're seeing in general terms is about a 5 to 10% growth in our tourism, hospitality, accommodation tax. With that being on the higher end, if you're in I would say a coastal community, very tourism related, versus if you're in more rural, you may not hardly see any growth at all. Hospitality tax fund there had a fund balance of $422,000. Again, revenues came in higher than the prior year by about $65,000. The beach restoration fund had really no change in fund balance. Again, just nominal revenues there. Really, there were no significant costs really paid out of that fund this year, even though you got some of that about to take place in the coming year. All right, next slide. Let's look at these government-wide financials that nobody really cares about, but we'll look at them. Remember, the GASB wanted to not only allow you to look at things on a fund level where you look at kind of cash or soon-to-be cash or cash that you're going to spend, but they wanted you to add all of your assets and liabilities. Well, what are your assets? Well, this building. What about your debt on your bonds? They wanted to add all of it so you could get a true net position or net worth of the city, like in a sense what your value is. So if you look at it on this basis, you had assets of about $38.5 million. That'd be great if that was all cash, but look where the bulk of that is. That's in your capital assets. But you did have $11.7 million in cash and investments and about $1.8 million in other assets. Your liabilities were about $13.3 million, of which $11.6 million was in bonds and other forms of debt. And then you had accounts payable and other accrued liabilities of about $1.7. So you take your assets minus your liabilities. The new term is net position, which is about $25.2 million net position at the end of last year, of which, if you took all your property, plant, and equipment, and you minus the debt from it, it would be worth about $13.8. The rest of it, and this is all book value. So you also had restricted fund balance of about $3.6. That's debt service money, tourism, hospitality, accommodation taxes. Remember, because you just can't spend that for anything. It has to be for tourism related. And then you're left with the unrestricted net position of about $7.8 million. In these government-wide statements, there's the revenue and expense numbers, but there's also, when we add your capital assets, we have to depreciate them over their estimated useful lives, and that number was about $1.5 million this past year. All right, next slide. Sometimes it's on such an angle, I have a hard time seeing it, so I'm trying to look at it also on my paper here. The total capital asset kind of highlight here, you had about $25 million in capital assets at the end of the year. This was a decrease of about $600,000 from the prior year. We wanted to highlight some of your purchases this year. You purchased some public safety vehicles for about $218,000. Purchase of a public works garbage truck for $182,000. Remember, you had some donated value of the paving of 18th Avenue for $85,000, and some other equipment purchases of $295,000. And the water sports dock and replace fuel dispensers for $126,000. And lastly, construction in progress still going on for Phase 2 drainage was about $136,000 at the end of the year. So you had those additions going that way, but you had depreciation going the opposite direction, which was about the 1.5 that you see there. All right, next slide. Long-term obligations. The outstanding balance at the end of the year was $11.6 million. This was a decrease of $1.3 million. Remember, this year we refinanced the Series 2008 General Obligation Bond. The real key point here was the big reduction in rate. And look at the interest savings that will create for you over time. We're looking at interest savings of about $174,000. Your scheduled principal payments this year, again, were 1.3. That's what really pretty much made up that decrease that you're seeing there. And we do have compensated absence balances outstanding. What that term is the vacation accrual. If everybody left and you had to pay them all off for all their accrued vacation and so forth, it would be about $332,000. All right, next slide. Always everybody's favorite when we implement new GASBs. You know, we talked to you in the last couple of years how the GASB felt like assets minus liabilities wasn't enough anymore, and they added some of these deferred inflows and outflows to make everything confusing for us. So that's one of the big changes. But as I mentioned before, they made a fundamental change on bond issuance costs. They said, you know what? It's not something that we should spread over time. It's a transaction cost. And when you enter into a transaction, just when you pay for it, expense it. Just expense it immediately. So that was a fundamental change. But the new deferred inflow of resources, this new concept, deferred inflow of resources, is your unavailable property tax. So what we did is we used to call it deferred revenue. It was a liability. We just moved it down under a new section called deferred inflow of resources. At the end of the day, nothing changed. It's just in a new bucket to confuse everybody. So that really was
It's working.
Yeah. So that really was the only really fundamental change for you as it related to GASB 65 and writing off the bond issuance costs. All right, let's talk about what's coming down the road. We've talked about this for a couple years, is that there's a fundamental change in pensions. Even though you don't have your own pension plan, but because you participate in a cost-sharing plan. And because the state plan, unfortunately, is underfunded, all the participating governments under this new GASB 68 will be mandated to record their proportionate share of the state's net pension liability on your books starting next year. Now, if you look at the numbers that we're talking about, we're looking at that it's going to be about $3.7 million for the South Carolina SCRS plan, and that number is going to be about $4.4 million for the South Carolina Police Officers Retirement System plan. So you add those two numbers together, you're right a little over $8 million. Now, it does not affect your general fund, okay? It doesn't affect the funds, but it goes to those government-wide statements where we add all your debt, all your capital assets. We got to add this new liability, and unfortunately, it's going to eat up almost all your net position. And again, I don't want you to get a little too troubled about it because everybody in the nation is having to do this, so you're not being isolated or picked on here. And then number two, it's not like this is a liability that you can pay it down. I mean, all you're required to do every year is to pay the required rates to the pension system. That's all you have to do. But what the GASB said is if that that plan is underfunded, ultimately, someone's got to make up that difference, and we think it's going to be those governments going to have to pay more in the future. So that's why they think that liability should be on your books, because ultimately, someone's going to have to pay is probably going to be those governments. All right. Next page on the kind of the compliance section here, we had no findings or significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. One thing we always like to remind you, if you expend more than $500,000 in federal awards, you have to have a single audit. We did not have that, but again, it's great to get federal awards, but it doesn't come without strings. So if you get a lot of it, there's an additional audit that has to take place. Management letter, you have hopefully a little separate letter. Another lovely reading piece of material. In the middle of it, the only really change here is that we talk about the implementation of GASB 65. And we just try to give you a quick summary of the impact of that. Outside of that, this letter is pretty boilerplate. It won't be much different than the prior year. Next year, we'll have the GASB 68 in that section, so you'll have us discuss that. Summary here real quick again. We want to remind everybody you got the best opinion you can get, which is an unmodified opinion. We think you really have a good, strong financial condition at the end of the year. And just remember, pension accounting changes are coming. And I just don't want you to be alarmed by it because it's going across the nation. And our state is pretty average in the way our state plan is funded. There's some states, the state plan is very underfunded. That liability is going to be a lot bigger in those states. Some places it's better. And they're going to end up recording less of a liability in those states. All right, I know it went quick. Any questions?
Jimmy?
Yes, Jim.
You say your responsibility, the city's responsibility is effective internal controls. Do you test those internal controls?
No.
You do not?
We do walkthroughs and look at it, but we don't test controls so that we can reduce our substantive testing. There's two ways to do it. You can test controls and not test as much of the account balances. We do walkthroughs and make sure we understand them. If we see issues in the transaction that we're looking at, we will write up findings or notes. But what we'll do is test a lot more transactions to make sure that they were handled properly.
So if there were discrepancies in certain funds or whatever, you wouldn't be necessarily testing those controls?
Not in every instance, no.
Okay, second question is on page 49,
Okay.
under notice of financial statements, item F, litigation. The city is periodically the subject of litigation by a variety of plaintiffs. The city management believes that such amounts claimed by these plaintiffs, net of applicable insurance coverage, are immaterial.
Correct. What we do is every year, of course, we talk with management, we talk to the city attorney, and we make sure are there any potential risk out there. Then we look to say, okay, is the insurance going to cover? Has it denied the claim? And so we evaluate, management evaluates it, and based on what we see today, we don't see anything significant exposure for the city. We confirm with the various lawyers out there, too, if they're working on the case. We'll send them a legal letter,
Right.
and we'll say, hey, what's the status of this claim? Is there any risk? What's the size of risk to the city? And they will report back to us if it's significant. If not, they'll say, hey, there's nothing there, or it's immaterial.
So
But we do
you
confirm
receive
those.
attorney letters from all attorneys doing any manner of work for the city?
We do it to anyone that's handling litigation claims or assessment. If they're here just doing, like, helping you with an HR policy, no.
Okay.
We're not going to waste money for,
Does that letter request current potential,
pending,
pending
and threatened, yeah.
but it doesn't cover necessarily long-term,
Well,
like
anything
greater
that's
than
being-
12 months?
Well, anything that's currently being worked on, if it's not being worked on, if nobody's actually filed a claim, there's not a lot of avenue because there's not even legal fees out there. We may hear management mention something to us. We're concerned about something down the road. Someone could press us on this, but they haven't filed a claim. There's not much we can do on it. If we heard something they said and we were all really worried about it, we may still disclose it. But there's not even been a claim. So there's really not a great risk for us to be able to report anything on that subject.
Thank you.
You seem confused. Did
I'm not.
it satisfy you?
I'm not confused at all.
Good.
Not one bit.
Excellent.
Yes.
Do you have a recommendation in terms of the retirement how we should prepare for that, or are there any recommendations so that we don't fall short in that category down the road?
You know, there's not too much. I would say if you had a lot of utility bonds, which you don't, that have rate covenants, that could be troubling, but you don't. And so for you, we'll show this big liability on your books on those government-wide statements, but it really won't have that great of an impact unless they raise your rates. I mean, your management will know about it because they have to submit the paperwork and tell them, hey, your rates for the next year are going to be this. And one thing to keep in mind, the GASB says right now we want all the participating employers to record this whole liability, but ultimately it probably will not all be borne by the participating government. What if they decide to raise employees' rates? That lowers that liability. But they're telling you right now you got to record that whole liability. What if investment returns come in better? What if they come in worse? There's a lot at play here, a lot of actuarial assumptions. And so it's going to be a volatile number. Every year we'll get a new number from the state, and we'll have to adjust that liability to the new number on those government-wide statements every year. But from a day-to-day standpoint, I really don't know if there's really anything else you can do. So,
Good.
yes.
Jimmy.
Mr. Mayor, I got 3 questions.
Okay.
How many cities do you do across South Carolina?
Cities.
Well,
Of similar size? A
Towns
similar
and
size?
Oh, probably of your size, close to 10.
10. And how do we stack up in comparison to those cities?
Oh, Lord.
Well, the problem is I don't do them all,
Look at
but
A.
I mean, I do talk to my colleagues, you know, in my firm, and when I was talking about management and how well, you know, your records are done, I mean, y'all are the very top in the sense of the information that's being given to y'all. There's a lot of little cities, they just don't have the resources or a CPA like Debbie to really be able to come in. And we have to really do a lot more assistance. You know, we may get to this unmodified opinion because we're going to make a ton of adjustments and get it all right, but they're going to end up with a lot of findings. You don't have any findings. We have a lot of clients we give a lot of findings to because they don't have the internal staff to get there, and we have to help some to get them there. So,
And then my last question.
Yes.
Of cities of similar size, talking about the enterprise funds, talking about the marina. And we've got some visions for the future on that marina, and that costs money. So, I mean, is that something that you see?
I think y'all are going to have to pony up.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get to in the long run.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's really what rubber meets the road.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I don't have another marina. Most of mine are water, sewer, electricity, solid waste. You know, it's those normal, I'd say, basic utilities that you're having to provide to
Right.
constituents. Yours is a little unique for me, to be honest with you.
Very unique.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a lot of people that have a marina, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions? Obviously, the statement will be adjusted when we have to make the recognition, but it's not a cash item for us, so.
Correct.
So we just
Right.
keep
And
keep on
in your
trucking.
opinion, we talk about that, that emphasis of matters paragraph. We already highlight that so everybody kind of be aware of. Because I don't want y'all to be surprised. We want you to kind of know what the number is. And you'll, if anybody asks you about it, you kind of can explain it as best you can and send them to Debbie.
And the rating agencies that give us bond ratings
Yeah,
are fully aware of.
what we've been told by Standard & Poor's and Moody's, as long as the state plan is about average funded, is the normal, you won't be downgraded or affected by it. If your state is way underfunded, you could actually see it could impact you a little bit on your rating. So our state is pretty average, and they don't expect any impact. So.
Okay. Other questions, concerns? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Good year. Thank you again. Okay. Whew. Let's move on to reports and standing committees. Well, no, let me ask, any other citizens want to make a comment? This is the time. Going? Eyes are glazed over after the audit report. Okay, we'll move on to report of standing committees. Ways and Means Committee. I'll report that we met at 5:45 on Tuesday, October 21st. We heard from our treasurer. We're 25% of the way through the year. Our revenues are at 12% of budget, which is obviously less than 25%, but it's the same as what we had achieved this time last year, and our expenditures are running at 21% of budget, which is obviously less than 25, and so it's still in good stead. Our tourism funds are moving forward. Our municipal accommodations collections year-to-date is 2% ahead of prior year, and we received $152,000 for the last month, and our hospitality tax is running at 13% ahead of prior year, and so that's always good news. We also reported that at that time that Condé Nast Travelers had reported that Charleston was rated have received number 1 rating in their survey of 80,000 some participants, again for the 4th year, number 2 in the world. But most people didn't realize that they had a separate category, a different rating for best islands in the world, and we were on the list, best islands in the world. Think about that. We came in number 28 out of 30, mind you, but still, we have something to improve on. So 28th out of 30, and that's good news, and we're in the top 10 in the U.S. So,
But that's a personal opinion, because we think we're number 1.
well,
We know we're number one.
and I think a good part of the world now knows we're number 1. They keep coming and visiting us, so that's always good news to get positive reinforcement. So we made a lot of other actions, so let me go through some of the actions. I'll make a motion to award a sole source contract to Carolina Waste in the amount of $30,000 for the replacement of the trash compactor.
Second.
Motion and seconded. This is a budget item at $30,000. So, any discussion on the compactor?
Just have a question.
Yes, sir.
When is, we estimate date of installation or place in service?
I'm going to turn to Donnie, or I'll make a statement. His comment was he'll place the award tomorrow, and when will he arrive? 4 to 6 weeks for the contractor, so.
That's installed.
So,
Thank you.
probably just after Thanksgiving is what you're saying, before Christmas? After Thanksgiving, okay, very good. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Now we're into award of a sole source contract for VC3. This is a master service agreement. VC3, of course, is the provider of our internet base and our security backup system, et cetera, and this is an agreement, a framework agreement that establishes the terms and conditions under which all of our subsequent relationships with VC3 will be conducted. So I'll make a motion to award the sole source contract.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Again, award of a sole source contract to Chris Jones in the amount not to exceed $20,000. This is to the update for our local comprehensive beach management plan. We had budgeted $25,000, but we're going to award a contract of not to exceed $20,000. I'll make that as a motion.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Chris Jones did the original plan and is quite involved with FEMA and all of the other regulations that are involved with beach management, so he's an excellent resource that the city has counted on in the past, and will work him well this time also. So, any other concerns?
One
Yes,
question.
sir.
On this, I guess he's taken into account the proposed annual parking pass?
Yes,
Yes, we will talk about that.
we are going, yes. He will come here and be briefed on what's going on in
Okay.
the city.
Thank you.
We'll get that all taken care of. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. This is now a recommendation from Public Safety Committee to mutually terminate the Zambelli contract and rebid the fireworks contract for this July 4th.
Make that as a motion?
Second.
Motion and seconded. Zambelli came to us and would like to step away from the contract unless we were willing to fulfill changes. We're not willing to fulfill those changes, so we're agreeing to terminate the contract along with them. So we'll rebid it here promptly, I suspect, so we can get a bidder. So, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Recommendation for the assignment, first, of the Baker Infrastructure Group contract to R.B. Baker, a division of Reeves, for the 2014 show management project. I'll make that as first motion to change the name on the contracts. Do I have a second? Motion seconded. All in favor of amending the original contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now, under that contract, I'd like to award a change order in the amount of $810,000, $810,500 for the current show management project.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion?
That's way under budget, is it not, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. We have funds on hand of $1,265,000, or awarding the contract of $810,000. Some of those additional funds will go for the engineering work, but
And also, there's personnel expense that the city has
City
that it
will.
charges to the project for the monitoring and counting of loads and security at the site, and then just some other miscellaneous charges, like for postage for notifications.
okay. This work, if we agree tonight, we'll start on Monday and start moving sand. Jimmy?
Yes, sir. One question. It was part of our package, and when it came in, there's another one on our desk. Was there any changes that
Yeah, there were no changes to the money. There were some minor modifications that the engineer did to the language.
But the one in your
It's the
packet
same as what you
should
had
be
in the
same
packet.
as what was on the desk.
Okay, I just didn't have
It's
time.
different from Ways and Means.
It's different
Okay.
from the one.
I just didn't have time to try to compare the two of them, so, thank you.
Okay. All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, consideration of Charleston County making repairs to Seahorse Court in the amount of $4,634.86. I'll make that as a motion.
Second.
Motion and seconded. This is some work that needs to be done in Seahorse Court. We've been leveraging, trying to get Charleston County to work with us on this, and they've come back and said they'll work for us on this. And for that, there's an expense of the $4,634.86 that's needed, and we will find a place in the budget. I think that was spoken of.
It's not a budgeted item.
It's not budgeted, correct, but we will find a space in the budget for it? You have a
Correct.
space? Okay.
Yes, for the funds, we did not spend all that we budgeted for the generator. So this will go there, and then we will talk about, for the FY16 budget, future line items to take care of things like this when we go through the budgeting process.
Okay.
But the leftover was well more than 463486.
Correct.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We had a discussion and informed everybody that we'll be hosting the City County Managers Association meeting in January. Unfortunately, they will be gone by the time we have the polar bear plunge, so we can't offer them the opportunity to dip in our water, unfortunately. We have set, out of Ways and Means, we set a special council meeting to talk about parking. That meeting is set for November 3rd at 5:30 here in council chambers, correct?
That's correct.
I heard something, I didn't know whether I said something wrong. Since this will be our first time to collectively talk about the feedback that we got from the citizens, we have sampled what we could do. We have some support at the legislative session at the legislative level. If we cannot get DOT to work with us, and we're hopeful that they will, and making accommodations for residents, then we'll get some legislation to put in place that will, at least we have support to put in legislation in place to get an accommodation for residents. Jimmy?
Would you mind expanding on that? What have you found out? What type of accommodations? I think the citizens are very interested in that.
Well, we haven't discussed it, so we'll have to deal with this. We can shape it on Monday, but what was talked about was every resident on the island with a registered vehicle on the island will get a free parking permit for any place on the island when we launch it.
Excellent. And also accommodations for their guests that might come
We
visit.
didn't talk about guests, because I don't know how to manage guests, but we talked about residents on the island getting an accommodation.
Well, that's a good step in the right direction.
Right.
Good news.
So hopefully, and we're setting a date we don't have a date yet with the DOT, right?
No.
Mr. Mayor, what will be the procedure?
We'll talk about that Monday.
Okay.
I'm just happy we got this far.
Right.
Very good.
You know, We'll have to figure out how we execute that, if in fact we get agreement from the Department of Transportation. Yeah, that should move forward. And just to finish, we did have an active discussion with these guys dealing with golf carts and golf carts movement on the island, and they're going to consider, we have some other options, and they're going to consider also some legislation if necessary. So we're going to run all paths, if that works well, to hopefully solve that problem so we can travel the island, one end of the island to the other, within 4 miles a year. You know, I'm not going to go there. Okay. Our next meeting is going to be on the 18th, and we'll meet at, 5:30, yeah. 5:45. I saw 5:30, but that's, I'm reading
Ways and
something
Means,
else.
not for-
All right, any other questions for Ways and Means? I don't see any. Let's move on to public safety, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Public Safety Committee met September 11th. Under citizens' comments, John Kane of Race 13.1 talked to us about a possible half marathon on the island. This is a for-profit company. They had talked to Wild Dunes. Interestingly enough, none of the race will take place inside of Wild Dunes. We discussed it more, and the consensus was the committee was not inclined at this time to recommend this event to the city as a city-sponsored event.
Good.
We discussed the Johnson & Johnson event, which was covered under Ways and Means. We discussed the law enforcement torch run, which was discussed in Ways and Means. That was new business. Under old business, we discussed parking between 21st and 41st Avenue. Administrator Tucker suggested the white line on the landward side of Palm Boulevard. A lot of discussion on that. We also talked about the possibility of parallel parking on that side. We've asked that staff check with Stantec to get clarification on the parallel parking. The committee did vote unanimously to recommend to council initiating a 4-foot white line from pavement parking on the land side of Palm Boulevard from 21st to 41st. I am not going to make a motion at this time as we have a discussion Monday to discuss parking. I just wanted to let you know the feelings of the Public Safety Committee, and we will discuss this Monday.
Okay, let me just interrupt while we're on that point. Staff is investigating with others what it took to get the 4-foot setback, if you will, on the ocean side of Palm, because we need we need authorization on the landward side also, or else the police department can't enforce it.
We
So-
realize this
so-
may
so-
take an active legislation.
But we've started that discussion, am I correct?
That's correct.
Yes. We discussed the fireworks contract, which was discussed previously in Ways and Means. And now, da-da-da-da,
Drum roll.
drum roll. The announcement of a new police department service. And I will ask, it looks as though Captain Usry is going to be, no? Here comes the chief.
She's running the
We've
hardware.
got a speaker and an operator here. Chief Buchanan, thank you.
Several months ago, we initiated a new program, or started a new program that we hope that the island residents will find very useful. Basically, what it will do, in a map presentation, a citizen can pull up on a map and see in a 2-week, 4-week, 6-month, whatever time frame they're looking at, by crime, the type of crimes that are occurring on Isle of Palms. After tonight, we will put this link out on our city website to citizens can go out to and say, I'd like to go see in my neighborhood or across the island, I'd like to see all the burglaries. I'd like to see all the other type of complaints that occur. So initially, what you will get is a map that will pop up. This is from Bear Analytics. It's called Raids Online, and it will pop up with the last 2 weeks' worth of incident reports. The good news also is that we go back for 12 years. We go back to the year 2002. So you'd be able to go back any time frame back to the year 2002 and pull up whatever crimes you want to see throughout the Isle of Palms.
Excuse me, let me ask you a question, though. Will we be going through the same steps that you've gone through, Captain, or will we get pulled right up to the Isle of Palms? You start at the, you start at the country, and you have to come down to the state and then find the
Or you
island.
can choose to type in an address in your bar here.
Unless you're on your smartphone, then it takes you right to your nearest location.
There you go. And it is an app as well.
I was going to lead into that. You would also be able to pull this up on your iPhone or Android phone.
You were up by Buchanan.
Sorry, Chief.
But when you initially get into it, you're presented with the last 2 weeks' worth of data. So as an officer writes a report, it is automatically uploaded into the system. So that day, if he takes a burglary report, it's in there that night or in the morning. It will be there by tomorrow morning, and you'll be able to actually see that general spot. Now, it does not tell you exactly where the incident occurred at. It puts it into a block range, so it kind of protects the person, because you can see right here, it will say the 2500 block of Cameron Boulevard for that particular offense, the burglary, commercial burglary there.
So if somebody does that, you have an IR number, I presume that's your record number.
Yes, there's an incident number that's listed up here.
Is that the incident number? Okay.
Right, that's our.
So if they wanted if they were a victim or whatever and wanted the police report, they could just give you the number.
They could give us the number, and under the FOIA in the state of South Carolina, anybody in the state can say, I'd like to see those reports. So this makes it available for them in easy enough fashion that they can go in and say, and quite often what we get is like in a real estate company will contact us and say, I say real estate company, a person buying a house will contact us and say, what's the crime rate like? I'd like to know, if you had homicides or burglaries or something. And now they'll be able to look this up and actually see it depicted in a form that would make sense to them and say, in my particular area, I had no burglaries, but I had, maybe noise complaints or something that they could show.
Will it show all noise complaints?
Yes, it shows up as all.
Even if it's been a warning or just unfounded, it will show all incidents?
It will show them all, because any report that an officer writes a report on shows up on here. And we have the officers write a report for all noise complaints, so that's on there.
Thanks, Jim.
You can see, I don't know what time frame she's looking at here, but these type of complaints show up, and you, as you mouse over it, you can tell what the complaint was about.
I think it was being highlighted earlier, but there is the provision to submit a tip on there if you,
Yes,
or if
down the
you're,
bottom, down the bottom there.
if you suspect and might have some information that would be helpful in solving
Yeah,
that particular.
down at the bottom of the box, if you have information that, and of course on certain type of crimes, you're not going to have any information. But if you know that like a burglary occurred and I know a suspect that could be involved in it, they can make a tip by clicking on this link here, and it will actually go out to one of our detectives, and they will be able to follow up on that tip.
There's also a tab to report good deeds.
What was that?
So there's a tab to report good deeds as well,
Right.
on the Android portion of it. So if you see something,
Good deeds,
Good deed doers.
how will those be handled, Chief? I mean, where does that report go to the dispatch, or not the good deeds, but like if somebody's going to report something?
Anonymous tips?
The anonymous tip
Yeah.
actually goes to our detective office.
Okay.
It will, they get the tip, they get an email, and if the person wants a response back, they can get a response back. If they want to remain anonymous, they can remain anonymous. But they will actually review it and follow up on it.
Okay.
So, would that go to, I mean, for dogs running at large, just any kind of call is going to show up and that kind of stuff?
If an officer writes a report, we want to relate a tip to it. We don't write a report on every dog at large case, but if something about that case, like the dog bit somebody, those typically get a report written on it, and somebody knows who the dog was, the dog owner, and they want to give that tip, it would go then.
I asked that question because all of a sudden I see all these little flags popping up on the screen, and somebody, as you said, calls and said, "What kind of crime are you having on the island?" All these flags pop up, and it's really minor little incidents.
Well, that's because I selected just for noise complaints, just to show those. This, on this side that you can't see over here, is this whole event.
Slide it over so that they can see your ability to manipulate what you're
Other
doing.
way.
Other way.
Otherwise.
This way?
No,
No, just the opposite.
See, Debbie was needed.
There you go.
There you go. Thanks. Don't help me.
What is there, like 15 of them on there?
Yeah, it's about that. But you have this whole list of different crimes that you can pick, and down at the bottom you can either select all or deselect. For Michael, I was just trying to show him all the noise complaints. This is a 2-week process. This is going to be either warrant arrest. These are those, there's your noise. There you go. Michael, there's one for you in the area of 42nd Avenue. So you can grab it and then you can see that information. Or you can select all, and for 2 weeks it's going to populate everything that happened within that 2-week time frame.
And as you can see, if you try to bring up 6 months worth of everything, we write about, 1,900 reports a year, between 1,500 and 1,900 reports a year. You would be quite busy up there. You'd really want to refine your search.
Are other communities using this?
Yes, there are many communities using it. In the local area, I know North Charleston's got it in place.
What you can do on this side also is you can jump to a particular city, and it's by state. I
Right.
believe the last count that I talked to Bear Analytics, they had over almost 600 agencies that they were serving. In South Carolina,
All right.
I like the-
I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
There we go. Berkeley County is reporting, Charleston County, Columbia is using it quite a bit, North Charleston. So there's quite a lot in South Carolina that are using it.
It's neat.
The other feature that it has, one more thing, is if sex offenders will also populate on the map.
Is Sullivan's Island using it?
No, sir.
So would this be part of your Facebook page where somebody could go in there and just real user-friendly type of thing?
I don't think we have any plans to make it part of our Facebook page. We're going to put the link out on the city's website to make it easily accessible. And I'm sure some will, make it a part of their favorite internet site, right?
Chief, does all this information kind of bubble up to a state agency where they kind of keep the data? In other words, over this year in...
The state of South Carolina, we're required to report to the state of South Carolina. We report to them every month. We have to report the SLED. What they get is raw data from us that says we had certain type of crimes, and they report that up to the FBI. They don't necessarily save it in a fashion that you could pull it up like this.
Okay.
They could give you raw numbers and tell you that we reported X number of cases in a year.
But there is, I'm only seeing this sideways, but there is data that comes up in bar form and pie chart form to show you what
This
the
is
kind
an,
of statistics are.
can we bring that back up? This is what you were looking at here is an analytical way of looking at it.
Right.
You can see by bar graphs and pie charts. You can see it by hot zones over here on the bottom right. When I say the hot zones, you can see most of the crimes that are occurring, or most of the incident reports that we have to write on, are occurring during a certain time frame. It might be at 3 o'clock in the morning, it might be 6 o'clock at night, but that's when the majority of the reports are being written, and it will change from week to week and month to month.
This looks like a great tool for you.
Amazing stuff, yeah.
So after tonight, this will go live.
Correct.
Very good. Other questions?
Technological guru you are, I know you love this.
Well, I like making the information available to the citizens out there.
Right.
To me, it's just another way of trying to be as transparent as you can. This
Yeah,
is
I
what's
think this is
happening.
good.
Any other questions, concerns? Thank you, Chief. Excellent job. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, we also
Good.
reviewed the golf cart law. Administrator Tucker stated she's heard from people, as we all have, that there should be a method to get from Harris Teeter or the south end of the island legally via with a golf cart. Might be two ways to accomplish this: a change in the law, which could take up to 2 years, or the possibility of taking a portion of the right-of-way out of the state system as such that the golf cart would not be on a state road. We'll be looking into these. It's a low priority for enforcement right now because of other happenings on the island, but it can still be a cause for a stop. And I'd also like to state that this is a state law. This is not an Isle of Palms law, as information. We also were presented with the police department job descriptions and the police and fire department organizational charts. We noted the changes in job descriptions were primarily reflective of the title changes in the department, as well as the addition of the statement refers to policy, procedures, manuals, computer manuals, codes, laws, ordinance, regulations, publications, and reference tests, etc. Also unanimously approved the job descriptions as we were directed to do by council in the next one. The departmental reports. Fire departments, swimmers were stranded on a sandbar, and it sounds as though there was a shark circling nearby, so they needed a little assistance in getting off. A jet ski was sent to return them to shore. There was a traumatic injury on Capers Island. Personnel loaded and transported the patient to the DeWeese helicopter landing area and took the husband to the Isle of Palms Marina so he could go to the hospital. There was a report of a golf cart fire on the golf course. Fire was out when personnel arrived, but they advised the cart owner to have the cart checked by an authorized repair facility. In September, personnel responded to a total of 66 calls. 34 of those were for EMS. 4 pre-incident surveys were done. Several response times for Charleston County EMS were a little longer than preferred, but the chief noted that Charleston County EMS has recently changed its staffing patterns, which may amount for the times. 35 fire inspections were conducted, which produced a total of 114 violations, and 5 members of the department completed the instructor training program. Chief Buchanan gave the police department a report. Personnel responded to 2 incidents when golf carts had been stolen and returned with serious damage. Again, if you have a golf cart, you should secure that golf cart, and securing is not taking the key out because they can easily be run with another key, or the key can be bypassed. I've seen several golf carts with chains in the axles chained to something substantial so they can't be driven away. And if they return the golf cart, doesn't mean they'll get a lesser charge if they're caught. They still did the wrong thing. On the issue of golf carts, the chief noted that alcohol is not allowed in them. And now, if you're on the golf course, it's private property, that's okay. But if you're driving a golf cart anywhere else on the island, no alcohol. Department personnel had a coffee with a cop at Harris Teeter on Wednesday, September 10th. They discussed various topics. 30 to 40 people were attending. That was both residents and visitors. A total of 4,761 calls were received by the Charleston County Dispatch for service to Owl Palm, Sullivan's Island National Park Service. 4,042 calls were for the Isle of Palms Police Department. Total of 360 traffic stops were made in September. 104 of these stops resulted in a ticket being issued. 41 arrests were made in the month, and again, the majority was for alcohol violations. Officers responded to 21 noise complaints, 20 received warnings, 2 were unfounded, and 1 citation was issued. Our next meeting is at 10 a.m. Thursday, November 6th, 2014, in the conference room. And you're still doing forensics on the public safety building.
Okay. Questions for public safety?
Yeah, could you, Marty, could you elaborate more on the Charleston County Emergency Response, EMS? What's happening with that, and what?
They've changed their staffing,
So,
so I guess they're getting used to the new level of staffing.
So have they reduced staffing or changed hours? Can you?
Chief, could you explain a little more fully what you discovered?
I was made aware of a schedule change. I'm not sure to what degree, what all impacts it's had, but I know this is new, and so we're going to be keeping an eye and see what happens, but that's really all I know.
Thank you. We'll
Okay.
continue to track that.
Jimmy?
Mr. Chair and Mr. Mayor, at the Exchange Club this past week, they were awarding our public safety officers, and I heard from Captain Ushery that they had made an arrest from some golf cart thefts, which is great. I commend you for doing that, because we've had a big problem on Isle Palms of recent time. So again, job well done.
Very good.
Caught red-handed, right?
Nice.
All right, no other questions? Let's move on to Public Works, please.
Thank you, sir. Public Works Committee met 5:30 p.m. Wednesday, October 8, 2014. All committee members were in attendance. Director Pitts gave his maintenance and trash collection report. It was no surprise that he stated his primary focus of work for the department in pumping water off the streets from the heavy rain from 46th to 52nd Avenues through September 18th through September 25th. We all remember how wet our September was. We moved on to old business, update on Seahorse Court and intergovernmental agreement. Administrator Tucker reported the city still not received an intergovernmental agreement from Charleston County, but that's played out, and the situation has been reconciled as in Ways and Means Committee meeting tonight. Item B was front breach lights. It was reported that SCNG has been given the green light to proceed with the lighting project. The pedestals will be installed first and may be in place by Christmas, and we're hoping they're in place by Christmas. We discussed the city trash compactor on J.C. Long Boulevard. That's going to be, those voted on the Ways and Means Committee tonight. No reason to go into that any further. We went to new business, no contracts in excess of $10,000, miscellaneous. Councilmember Loftus stated the City Council has sent the job description to the Assistant Director back to the committee for review, but it was not on the agenda. And Councilmember Ferenz commented that she also understood that the Public Works Committee was to review the job description. And that will be taken care of at our next meeting, which will be Wednesday, November 5th, 2014, at 5:30 p.m. We adjourn at 6:14 p.m.
Very good. Any questions, please?
Question on the repair of the Loadmaster, is that something that had we had a mechanic on site, something we could have done?
the Public Works Director
I'm
is
sorry.
shaking his head no.
Yeah, okay.
He's either a bobblehead doll or he's saying no. All right, any other questions for Public Works? All right, let's move on to the Recreation Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Recreation Committee met on Tuesday, October 7th at 9 a.m. Council members Buchanan and myself were in attendance. Councilmember Harrington came in a little later. There were no citizens' comments. Previous minutes were approved. Recreation Director Page reported that the rains of late have played havoc with both game schedules and with the delay in our ball field renovations. However, we're getting back on track on catching up, and the ball fields are just about done, and softball starts next week on a new ball field. That's exciting. I walked by there tonight. It looks great. Youth basketball registration has started into the next seasons. The fall programs and classes have resumed. The first Keenagers met on September 3rd after the summer absence, with 47 members attending. They have also formed a wellness walking class to be held indoors at the rec center. We'll walk for half an hour, which is, good. Stay healthy for all ages. The Zumba classes are always successful down at the rec center. Classes are being offered to city employees at no charge, which include BOSU, semi-personal training, total body challenge, Pilates, yoga, and Zumba. The Community Wellness Fair on September 25th was a big success with 85 residents and 47 employees. Besides, we had 26 vendors participating who all want to come back, and we had flu shots being given from doctor on call. The Isle Palms Connector Run had about 1,500 runners and walkers. Director Page commented how well the police and fire departments were in their support efforts of making it run smoothly. This past Friday night, we had its ghostly tide tails. The weather was perfect. The stories were scary. I couldn't sleep that night. Thank you all very much for that. Estimate of attendance was about 300, and again, the police helped do a great job in safely getting everyone across the street. I mean, there was a lot of people, and that's a packed little area right there, especially when the lights were out. Our annual Halloween Carnival is held this Friday from 5 to 7. Be there and be scared. Also during this event is the much anticipated intercity rivalry between departments for pumpkin decorating and carving contests. There were some questions from last year as for the winner. This year will be yet another battle for the title of winner. I see some smiles out there in the crowd, but I'm not saying any names. The annual holiday street festival will take place on December 6th from 2 until 7. This is yet another big recreation and community event. As budgeted, the city gym floor is to be lined, and also Sheila Redmond is getting estimates from painters for the porch ceilings and post. Under new business was our previous mentioned discussion of the ball field renovations. There were no other new business. Our next meeting is for November 4th at 9 a.m. So ends my report.
Excellent. Any questions for Rex? They keep bouncing along. No pun intended, of course. Let's go on to real property, please. Personnel, excuse me. I got this out of order. Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. The regular meeting of the Personnel Committee was held at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, October 8th, followed by two special meetings on October 22nd at 1 o'clock and October 23rd at 2 o'clock. You don't have copies of the draft minutes from the 22nd or the 23rd, but with your indulgence, I will report on the outcomes of all three of these meetings. The press and public were duly notified of all meetings in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. First line of business was consideration of the city administrator's job description and evaluation. The main topic of the October 8th and October 22nd meetings was consideration of the city administrator's job description and evaluation. After much discussion and unfortunately no agreement, Councilman Batelli moved to defer action on a city administrator job description to the November meeting. Chair Ferend stated that she could not second that motion. Therefore, nothing would be presented to council until the full committee approved the job description for city administrator. Based on that fact, a special meeting was called for October 22nd at 1:00 p.m., at which time all 3 members of the committee would be present. At the October 22nd special meeting, the chair presented the city administrator job description preferred by Councilmember Patelli, with additions from the documents presented by Council Members Harrington and Chair Ferenz. After much discussion, additions and deletions were made to that document, but with changes, the committee unanimously approved a city administrator job description. We then went on to the consideration of approved updates for job descriptions. The city treasurer and city assistant administrator descriptions were revisited. It was determined that with the title change to assistant administrator, a new description should be developed to address the responsibilities of that position. The city administrator was asked to develop that job description and present it at the October 23rd special meeting to enable the committee to present all the job descriptions to City Council at one time. On October 23rd, the assistant administrator job description was reviewed and unanimously approved. Having been reviewed and approved by the Public Safety Committee, Public Works Committee, and Personnel Committees, I move that the job descriptions for City Administrator, Assistant City Administrator, City Treasurer, Public Works Assistant Director, and the 13 Police Department job descriptions to include Communication Specialist be approved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? Jimmy?
What about the job evaluation form for the city administrator?
That will be presented at the November meeting.
They're still working.
We're still working on it.
Well, that's going to be presented in November. Well, I appreciate the hard work the committee's done, commend the chair, but that was my main focus for the whole deal, everything. Descriptions, they were fine with me. I'm just concerned about that one evaluation. But that will be presented in November?
Yes.
Okay.
Question.
Yes.
If that's going to be in November, are we voting on 2 different things then? Are we going to put it all in one? Are we going to wait until November?
We're voting on the job descriptions
Okay.
now. That's,
But not the evaluation?
but not the evaluation. No, we don't have it. So, okay.
For city
For city administrator, we have all the other evaluations.
If
Okay.
that's the will of the council.
So state the motion specifically, please.
The motion is to approve the job descriptions for city administrator, assistant city administrator, city treasurer, public works assistant director, and the 13 police department job descriptions to include the communication specialists.
That's it.
We're talking job descriptions only.
Job descriptions only.
And
Thank you.
All right, Marty?
Question, did I not just hear that Public Works had not yet approved the Assistant Public Works Director's job description?
That is correct.
That's right.
There was no action taken at the Public Works.
so that would
So
not be
we'll-
included.
So let's amend the motion to not include the assistant director of
Public Works assistant director.
Okay. I'll make that as an
Well,
amendment to the
I'd
motion.
like to make a recommendation that we withdraw this and do this all in the November meeting, because number one, it doesn't make sense to invite and do part of this, and to me, this is all one package. And so I'd say we,
Yep.
ask you to withdraw your motion so we can do it all one time and do it the way, that's a process I think would be work best.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, please.
I would say that, we're unduly stringing this out. We have the job descriptions that we have the evaluations for supervisory and non-supervisory employees. We're talking one job description, one employee evaluation, and I don't see that it makes any amount of difference. We need to go ahead and approve what we can tonight, and let's move forward.
We've got all this paper. I don't want to see it again. Let's, there's been no objection to the job descriptions as proposed. We have a motion on the table
I think it was unanimous recommendation from
from personnel.
personnel, so I don't see any point in stringing it out either.
Okay.
But the way it is right now, we've got one of those job descriptions not going to happen in this vote, which is Public
Okay.
Works.
Okay.
But wasn't there an amendment by the mayor to take that one out?
Yes.
Was it seconded?
Second.
Okay.
I second.
On the motion to remove from Public Works, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're now considering all the other job descriptions.
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
I can understand some of the need to have this all in one package, because I think the job descriptions and the evaluation tools go hand in hand. It's not like the job descriptions are removed from the evaluation tool, especially in the way the city administrator's evaluation tool is being looked at. So I can understand that, the need for that, if it makes it simpler to just go through in one whole package. So I'll remove my
I
motion.
I believe
We
we'd
have
make
all of
for a
this.
shorter meeting next month if we were to act on what we could tonight and only have a couple of things to vote on next month.
If we had to next month, if there was something material we needed to change, another job description, we could do it then. But we have valid job descriptions that nobody has found to be at odds, and the committee has
I just
approved. Yeah, no,
put that out there.
Okay, we have a mo,
Did you vote on the amendment?
Yes.
already?
Yes.
Okay, so the
Public
vote on the
Works.
amendment has
it's
passed.
solved. So, all in favor of approval of the job descriptions we have before us, please say, as amended. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Okay, job descriptions, that's done. We will hold on anything else till next.
And I'd like to make a comment, during the October 8th meeting, I would like to state that the reason I did not want to discuss and make a recommendation during that meeting was because only 2 of the 3 members of the Personnel Committee were there. One, I believe, the other one was in the hospital. I believe he was excused. And it was my feeling that something of this importance needed to be reviewed by the entire committee, not just part of the committee. And we did review it later on, and we did approve it.
Okay, Sandy.
Going forward, we then move to the consideration of the citywide evaluation tools for supervisors and non-supervisors. The evaluation tools for supervisor and non-supervisor were approved by the committee at the September meeting and are to be approved by council along with the job descriptions. So I would move that we approve the supervisor and non-supervisor evaluation tool, which is in your packet. This
Okay.
does not include the city administrator tool. I want to
Okay.
clarify that.
Second.
We have a motion and second for the supervisor and employee performance evaluation forms that you've received twice now. So, any discussion?
It does not include the administrator.
Correct.
I have a question. I mean, is the committee committed to have this wrapped up for the end of the year, to have the city administrator
It'll be done in November.
Yes.
evaluation
And
done?
in fact, we,
For consideration?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I mean, I
we
know this has
had
been going on all
request,
year.
yeah, we had requested and have received the supervisor's evaluation tool in a electronic form, so that now each member of the personnel committee can make changes to that supervisor form to more represent a city administrator evaluation form. All of those will be compiled, and hopefully at our meeting on November 5th, we will have a document already to discuss, so that we're not spending these 3 weeks in the meantime not doing anything. It is the will of the committee to come out of that committee with a city administrator evaluation form that we can bring to council for approval.
So we'll have this in November's council meeting to vote on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor of approving the supervisor and employee evaluation forms, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries.
Okay, then we followed up with update on interviews for boards and commissions. All those interviews have been completed due to one candidate removing her name from consideration. So at our November 5th meeting, we would be compiling a slate for City Council's approval. There are no city staff changes. City is fully staffed with no full-time vacancies. The regular meeting of the Personnel Committee is set for November 5th at 10 a.m. Our safety sweepstake winners from the Building Department is Kathy Kennedy, Police Department, Melissa Dawson, Public Works, Charles Williams, and Fire Department, David Miller. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for personnel? All right, let's move on. Now we can do real property.
I've been waiting.
I've been, you're on deck, right? This is World Series time.
Thank you, Mayor. Real Property met on Tuesday, October 14th. All members were present. Meeting started with comments. Jay Clark from the Marina Creek Grill had informed the committee the restaurant is totally filled up. All balances are paid for the restaurant. Under old business, a lot of discussion about the leases for the Marina Outpost and the Marina joint ventures. Brian Berrigan had asked for to merge both leases together into one thing for a proposal of a 30-year lease. Basically, it's the lease as far as merging them together, and to make that change would require rebidding the leases, and he's decided not to move in that direction. Okay. The current leases, one thing he's asked is there's a CPI adjustment with the current leases, and also he's asked that the rent provision that's worth about $4,700 annually be removed from the lease. Also, pay for the freezer. The proposed leases did not mention a dry stack operation and how it would move forward. Councilperson Bergwolf felt that parking was a problem and needs to be addressed specifically, and additional changes to the lease, and she wanted everything spelled out in detail. Council Administrator Tucker said these proposed leases do not spell out fiscal responsibility for the big-ticket items like the POS and the store equipment. Council Member Buchanan feels a 30-year lease is an incentive for the leaseholder to invest in the property. Brian Berrigan plans to talk to his investors to support coming up with a $4 to $5 million support for the marina over a 30-year lease, and he would need that in order to recoup the investment. Under next order of business was the beach access for handicap improvements. The city identified 2 areas that could be possibility for handicap access. Douglas Kerr talked about 9th Avenue, and it was one option. He's discussed this with OCRM. The city's looking at using crushed shell as a flat surface for beach access for handicapped access, and the cost would be about $3,600. OCRM has approved the plan. The motion was made and it was approved unanimously for that. Donnie Pitts and Douglas Carr also discussed 42nd Avenue as a second handicap access. This site is basically proved to be more challenging for us to move. First of all, South Carolina DOT would be involved because of an encroachment permit, and loss of parking space in that area could be a challenge. Administrator Tucker estimated the cost of that access would be $95,000. There's also a concern about the residents in the area of expanding that, so it was decided to take this up at a later meeting, so we did not move forward on that. We already talked about the assignment of the contract to Baker Construction, so that's covered. And we also talked about Chris Jones with the 5-year update of the beach management plan, and that's moved forward with Ways and Means. There's a special meeting to discuss marina leases on tomorrow at 5:30. That's Wednesday the 29th, and the next meeting is set for November 6th at 5:30 p.m.
Very good. Questions for real property?
Mr. Mayor?
They have a handful.
Michael, on page 4, it states that Chair Loftus said that the leases must be able to stand on their own. He suggested that leases go back to the city attorney. Is that being done?
That's going to be part of the discussion for tomorrow's meeting, so.
Barney?
A question about the walk-in freezer and the $4,700 a year.
Vanessa, I think one number I heard was about $30,000.
I don't
I don't know, but
I'd
that's,
have to look at the
we haven't talked about a specific
capital
number
plan.
about that in
I just did some
several months.
quick calculations, and if we were to not
Freezers wouldn't last the 30 years, so you'd have to do it at least twice,
So,
and maybe
well,
three times.
absolutely.
So I-
We're deep in
I'm-
discussions about
Yeah,
this.
they're up to their
Even better,
eyeballs.
even
They're up to
better.
their
We'll have
eyeballs.
more
Good luck.
clarification for council after the next two meetings we have.
Thank you for your work on that.
But,
know
Mr. Mayor,
how
but it's not
trying
just
that
the
is.
walk-in freezer.
No, it's the
idea-
whole thing.
It's the whole idea was, you know, that the city wanted to find a way that the leasee could absorb the cost of the marina and the replacement of those things. When I talked to Brian, he says, well, in order for me to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into the property, I can't do it on a 5-year lease.
Right.
And that was the idea, was we're going to go through, extend his lease, so he would take on everything except for what's stated in our lease, which is the bulkhead, the fuel stations, and the docks, basically, is basically what it would be.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Cindy.
Talking about a 30-year lease, how does this meld into the long-range plan for the whole marina site that's being looked at? Isn't lease review part of that process?
I think that where that is right now is that the Planning Commission, I believe, is going to be interviewing the people who've submitted proposals. And so depending on which one they select and what they have outlined as their actions that they would take in that, would detail out what they're going to do. That certainly could be one component of it. As Councilman Buchanan has stated, though, I think that clearly there are even more than hundreds of thousands. There's millions of dollars worth of possible work that could be done at the marina site. And there is no reserves in city funds to be able to fund those kinds of things. And the city has had no recent appetite for wanting to borrow the money to do that work. So it becomes apparent by that process that if the work is going to be done in something other than just piecemeal, things like what we did in this last year with the rehabilitation of the tidal wave dock, there will need to be the infusion of private money to do it. And the only way that's going to happen is with a longer-term lease. So that's kind of where we are.
Jimmy, you have?
Yes, sir. And going back to Councilman Buchanan's, suggestion about a 30-year lease, again, we've talked about this before, and to me, it just makes sense if we can get, and what I don't quite understand is, do we have to put it out there for bid again if we go? So why not go with a long-term lease, take all these things off of our plate that we have to worry about? We got a guaranteed tenant down there. It just makes common sense, and let them invest the big bucks, and we don't have to do it as a city.
I think that's the direction
That's-
they're working
that's
in.
what we're for tomorrow.
The city marina does a
That's where
50-year
they're-
lease.
That's where they're going.
All right.
One last question. Does this set a precedent? Does that mean all the other lessees on the marina property will get 30-year leases?
No.
No, but that could
But
be
it could
something
be.
they could
Doesn't
be
mean they
asking
can't come
for.
with
They
Yeah.
could request it, but it
Will
would
it set a
certainly,
precedent that
All
you
leases
wouldn't
are
have
allowed.
you don't have to do it.
No. I think based on your history, both payment, on time payment and history, your history of paying to the city, I think that has a lot to say to it as well.
It's far more complex.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to set a precedent by saying
Right.
we'll do this for one lessee,
No,
do the others have the right to have
and we'll
30?
discuss it tomorrow, I think the fact that if you have a tenant who's paying their lease monthly, on time, with all other things that are on top of it, on time, then yeah, you have a good tenant, and you would extend something to them. If you have a leasing who's not paying it, who's, always late, who you have to hound to get money, then no, I don't think you would want to invest in, it's like
Additional time.
renting out an apartment. You're not gonna keep on renting out an apartment if somebody keeps on paying late.
Okay. Any questions?
That was, when our accountant was here talking, that was one of my questions to him, talking about our enterprise funds in the future, and was talking about the marina. So again, I think we're going in the right direction here.
Good. All right, no other points for real property, move on. You have minutes from the planning commission, and you've digested that, I'm certain. No questions for them, they're moving into the interview stage, I guess, is their next initiative. Bill's already in your possession, council. Make a motion to approve second reading by ordinance 2014-05, an ordinance authorizing the transfer of all rights, titles, and interests City of Isle of Palms may have in the properties identified by the TMS numbers as specified on the documents to the water and sewer system by quitclaim deeds. I'll make that and suspend the reading of the ordinance.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion on the movement of the properties of Water and Sewer Commission? None heard. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. These guys have their eyes still open, waiting all this time. Next item, introduction of new bills, resolutions. We have first reading by title only of ordinance 2014-11, an ordinance to amend section 8A of ordinance number 1999-20, City of Isle of Palms, South Carolina, the franchise ordinance to increase the franchise fee payment from the South Carolina Electric and Gas, the company to the City of Isle of Palms from 3% to 5% on the gross sales revenue from residential and commercial sales of electricity. I'll make that as a motion.
Second.
Motion and seconded. This is obviously increase the, as I said, fee from 3% to 5%. Jimmy?
Won't they just pass that right along to their customers?
Yes,
So residents be paying more?
correct. I believe we're the only community that isn't at 5% now, so we stand out. Any other concerns? All in favor of first reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, 2 noes.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Ryan and Jimmy.
Thank you.
Miscellaneous business, we have a special meeting, as you know, as I announced earlier, at 5:30, November 3rd. We have penciled in a date of November 11th, if, depending on the progress made on the 3rd. And our next regular meeting will be following the Ways and Means meeting on Tuesday, the 18th of November. So please make yourself available for a long day on the 18th, and have Thanksgiving off. So, no need for an executive session. Any other subjects?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. I love that sound. Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're out of here. Thank you.
Bye.